Wow, fantastic. It's all about the orange pill. I took a lot of orange pills over the years. Even before the official orange pill, I was orange pilling.
Yes, because the 60s are back, Max. And, you know, you people from the 60s, you boomer sorts, you know, you guys dropped a lot of stuff.
Yeah, this is a continuum of what we've been saying for decades and decades. You know, emancipation. This is the final emancipation from the slavery of us. Anyway, inflation is raging for real, Stacy.
We've had a big week. So inflation is raging. The Bitcoin ETF looks like it's happening. We've had the official data come out that inflation is now at 5.4%, which means at least 2x that, right? We also saw this tweet here, this headline about the Fed's barking. Quote, this is funny. If it turns out inflation isn't transitory, there's no shame in saying that.
Right. Remember, there was inflation now for 20 years, but they, for some reason, insisted on calling it deflation. Then when it started to become out of control, they're saying, well, it's inflation, but it's transitory. Now when they're saying, well, it's not transitory, it's a cyclical turn in the inflation cycle. And anybody who's thought that we weren't in a secular turn is going to be grossly mistaken. But the fact is, we're heading in now to the beginning of a hyperinflation. This is total collapse of the currency, confidence in the dollar and all fiat money. And so that's what is starting to come into the focus. And also people are quitting their jobs in record numbers, Stacy.
So that's important to put into the context of the situation, because we mentioned the 60s. Of course, they were dropping acid and Lord knows what else they were dropping down up in Harlem, where Max was living in the late 60s, early 70s. But the thing is that, you know, back then we had stagflation. People wanted jobs. They were desperate for jobs, right? But there were no jobs available because of the high inflation. Cause the economy to contract. But nowadays, so on the two sides of this global fiat system is the biggest debtor nation, the United States, and the biggest creditor nation, China. So both sides in this week, we've seen the numbers come out from the US where there was a record number of Americans quitting their jobs because everybody has free Biden bucks, right? Why work? Why build? Why do anything? And in China, where they're, you know, a lot of upper middle class kids and middle class kids, this huge explosion of middle class, they're online, they're on social media, they see how we live. And basically they're building the wealth, right? Manufacturing the wealth. And the young people there have a lie flat movement. So they're just laying flat, right? They don't get out of bed. So the president, Xi, just for the first time this week, actually acknowledged it and said this is a danger to our economy and our society. So people need to get up out of bed and start working.
Yeah, it's like an IKEA flat pack, but for people. Anyway, meanwhile in Bitcoin, builders are building because cypherpunks write code. Time now to turn to Chris Tramount. He's from Scarce.City. Builds itself as lightning auctions for fine Bitcoin goods. Alex Schaefer recently sold one of his Burning Bank series on the platform for a whopping 1.2 Bitcoin, and the website's first auction was Relentless Optimism by Chief Monkey and Mosaic Rocks. Chris, welcome back to the Orange Pill Podcast. Tell us about Scarcity. What is it? How does the auction work?
Max, it's good to be here. Scarcity is a marketplace that sells Bitcoin goods for Bitcoin using Bitcoin technology. We exist to support Bitcoin culture and adoption.
Right. That culture is really important because we're going to get to some of the old culture from the 2014 era coming back into the art space at the moment with the rare Pepes. But I want to talk about this, the what we call Renaissance 2.0. So the whole art movement within Bitcoin and the importance of memes and the artists to Bitcoin, especially, it gets more and more so. There was some in the early days, there were all the pink Wojak stuff and the rare Pepes, but now it's just like nonstop memosphere. So we're going to get into that. But first, just go on the technical side. How do you use Lightning? Because the one thing that we see from the naysayers and the shitcoiners, they say Lightning will never scale. Is that your opinion? Having worked, yours is one of the most successful applications of Lightning. So tell us exactly what Lightning does for you.
So we use Lightning in a unique way, and it's to actually collateralize auction bids. So to participate in one of our auctions, we don't need personal information from the users. All we need is a little bit of collateral in the form of Bitcoin. Bitcoin is pristine collateral, and Lightning makes it extremely usable. So if you want to place a bid in one of our auctions, you input how much you want to bid, and then you pay an invoice that's a small fraction of that actual bid. And ideally, you pay it over Lightning so that you can do it instantly, basically for free and anonymously. We do also accept on-chain deposits. Well, while fees are low, that's okay. But certainly the best way to get the easiest experience out of our platform is to use the Lightning Network. And we've been using it for about a year now. And it's worked from the beginning, but it's gotten phenomenally easier to use just over the course of a year. We can put through payments that are much larger. The onboarding experience is much easier for new users. So we're definitely seeing it scale.
Oh yeah, what kind of volume now are you seeing? We haven't spoke for a little bit. Well, what is the actual volume now?
Well, the volume on Scarce.City, wow, we've done. It depends on the Bitcoin price, right? But we've done over 5 million in USD in auction and marketplace sales in less than a year.
Yeah, that's really phenomenal growth. Looking really good. And I want to quote Adam Back here, who said that digital rights management, or DRM, does not work. Internet physics dictates that you cannot usefully, quote, own digital files. Internet physics dictates. So what's really going on is digital patronage. You are donating to the artist, getting a transferable / resellable certificate thanking you for your donation.
Right. So we're kind of jumping ahead there to the NFT side because, so far Scarcity has been focused on the physical art that you're selling, like Alex Schaefer's Burning Bank series. Relentless Optimism is, of course, a big piece as well. So in terms of the NFT space, because I know you're doing some of those, you have some of the rare Pepes, and those are original NFT artwork, the non-fungible tokens, the collectibles that were first issued back in 2014, and it's part of the culture, embedded in the culture of Bitcoin. So what do you think about his Adam Back's notion that just like Renaissance 1.0, essentially this is just patronage? It's not the equivalent of buying physical art.
I think there's certainly something to that. The community behind the tokens or the artist is a large portion of what someone's buying when they buy an NFT. Now, NFTs are a controversial subject for good reason. I don't know where they'll go, but I know that they will exist. If you just look at the kids playing Fortnite, spending thousands of dollars on skins that add no value into the game, they're going to continue spending that money on virtual goods, probably going to spend more money on virtual goods in the future. So that it's a big part of our future. Now, we'll see what it looks like. I think a lot of what we're seeing now will end up trending to worthlessness, especially in terms of Bitcoin. However, the first tokens of these sort, before we even had the term NFTs, were rare Pepes. And they're unique because they're actually on the Bitcoin blockchain. And they are one of the first projects. The first rare Pepe was released in 2016. And they emulate Bitcoin culture in many ways. And as you mentioned, the memes of Bitcoin are so important, and rare Pepes are some of the best memes in Bitcoin. So as collectibles, look, we're finding a lot of Bitcoiners appreciate them, and we're seeing them actually spreading the good word of Bitcoin.
Yeah, let me jump in this concept of DRM, or digital rights management. It goes back to the work of Lawrence Lessig, who argued against copyright at the Supreme Court. There's been a decade's worth of discussion about intellectual property. Copyright law, is it not fit for purpose? The original copyright law in the Constitution was for 17 years with an option to renew for 17 years. We now have what's called perpetual copyright, thanks to big corporations like Disney. But, putting aside the NFT for a second and just focusing on this digital rights management and copyright issue, is it not so that what we're seeing is an end run around copyright?
I don't know. Look, I'm not a copyright lawyer, and there's certainly many legal battles to be fought on this front. And I think it's one of the biggest challenges in the space because it's very hard to detect. If someone launches an NFT, it's very hard to know has that NFT already been launched in some form. I think that's one of the biggest challenges of the space. We'll see if it gets solved. Look, we're not focused on the newer NFTs. We're focused on the vintage NFTs that are true to Bitcoin, and we think there is a bright future here in some form for quote unquote NFTs. And we will be exploring that, but I think a lot is to be figured out here. I think there's a lot of technology to help along the way, and I think a lot of that technology is going to be on Bitcoin.
Yeah, I think just like Bitcoin took 20, 30 years to create, there were cypherpunks tried for 20, 30 years to create Bitcoin, and then finally, instantly it happened. I see that people want something for artists. Like the artists are so important to Bitcoin, and perhaps there will be a solution without these digital rights management, which is like Max is suggesting, like part of the whole fiat world. And, the rare Pepes, the thing about it is that it's the ongoing evolution of culture and Bitcoin's place in basically the collapse of that whole fiat system, and the collapse of at least the revelation of the absence of faith any longer in a lot of the institutions of the fiat world. Pepe, of course, became a political actor when Hillary Clinton mentioned that Pepe was for Donald Trump. And at the same time, Bitcoiners were just building an alternative monetary system, an alternative economy, while the fiat world, this battle was going on to rule the fiat world as in their last days, right? So I think it is an interesting historical thing. But David Bowie, who was also like an innovator in terms of art, he was one of the first to mention that you just have to be more creative. You have to think. He said, like, the days of selling my music are over, right? That's over because of perfect digital downloads. He's like, we just have to start performing live. I'm just going to have to go give people an experience. So I think certainly Scarce.City, going to your website, that is an experience. So I want to go a little bit more into that Lightning thing though, because like the disintermediation. So everybody could know what Sotheby's are, for example, or any of the Bonhams, these auction houses. They know what an auction is. It's a scene in many classic films and stuff like that. Like just the layers of disintermediation that Lightning allowed for you. First of all, would you even be able to build this site had it not been for Lightning? And then, go over that thing of like exactly having no KYC, having no intermediaries, having no bank accounts, like how it's revolutionized that auction process.
Yeah, so to answer your first question, sure, we could have built Scarcity without Lightning, but we would be constrained by the fees on the Bitcoin network, which, as we see in other protocols, that becomes a real problem. Especially, we launched, just after the halving when fees spiked. So I think the key to all of this technology is building protocols that are not dependent on on-chain congestion and that can scale independent of what's happening on-chain. And that's exactly what Lightning does. And I think we'll see layer 3 protocols that take that a step further. Now, what's interesting also about us is we don't have a bank account. Everything we do is in Bitcoin. All of our collateral is accepted in Bitcoin. All of our transactions are in Bitcoin. We are truly without a bank and without need of a bank, and we are self-sovereign and taking responsibility and custody of our funds. So I think that's something that you're going to see a lot of in the future. And what's really special about that is it adds a whole lot more incentive as a business when you're earning Bitcoin versus USD. When you are bullish on Bitcoin and that's what you're earning your income in, it gives you just so much more incentive to work harder for that Bitcoin, because you're not looking at a Bitcoin as $1 worth of sats. You're looking at the future potential value of that Bitcoin. So I think there's so much here for future businesses that rely on Bitcoin to just be supercharged as far as incentives. And we're starting to feel that now, and I think many will follow.
Right. And also I want to add in terms of that patronage model, before we move on, because the NFT is like, people participate in that hugely. Like GoFundMe is a patronage, like you're just giving somebody, you're not getting anything back. Or of course, like many journalists have patrons now, essentially. Their readers pay them. It's not
there's Patreon.
Patreon. It's not like their content can't be shared freely. And I've done that myself with some of the journalists I finance. They allow you, they say, just forward this on to some of your friends if you feel like it, but don't abuse that. So, there is that model already embedded into our culture. But in terms of this auction, because I find the auction thing really, it's just raw market, right? But I love the way, me on Twitter, I get very excited and participate in the last few moments of your auctions. And the gamification of it that is enabled because of Lightning, I find really fascinating. But presumably you're thinking of auctions could apply to all other asset classes, right? Is this going to be something that you see spreading, or are you just going to say focus on art?
Oh, we certainly see huge opportunity to expand into other types of items. A lot of it depends on Bitcoin and Lightning adoption. If you have a Lightning wallet, we are by far the easiest auction to participate in, because all you're doing is scanning an invoice with a small amount of money, just enough to keep you accountable for your bid, and your auction bid is placed. Now, it is still a big onboarding experience for someone who's not on Lightning, or especially if they're not on Bitcoin. So as Bitcoin and Lightning's adoption accelerates, our addressable audience accelerates with it. And then we can start to think about, okay, what are the other types of items that this larger audience will appreciate? Now, of course, a big part of what our mission is to support Bitcoin culture. So everything we do will align with Bitcoin culture. But I tend to think of Bitcoin culture as a broad term. At the end of the day, Bitcoin is freedom. So anything that represents that, we would love to support.
Yeah, taking the point of view of the artist for a second. So artists are self-expressing. They're expressing themselves. And of course, most of the time they do so regardless of the economics involved. They're simply compelled to make art. And in the digital space, that's been almost a bad word for artists because of the experience going back to Napster. For example, in the beginning of the digital music era, it really killed the music industry as we know it, and it had to reinvent itself. But my question is, are artists now coming to the digital marketplace seamlessly without even having to get over the hump of saying, well, this is a geek-filled digital place. This is just like my box of paints, my piano, and my laptop. It's just all the same at this point. Is there any difference now between the laptop and the digital artist and any other artist?
I think broadly, there's something really special about Bitcoin where anyone, once they do take that orange pill, they want to contribute in any way they can. And if you're a software developer, there are clear paths to develop software for Bitcoin. If you're someone who's into media, there's clear paths to do a podcast such as this, or write blogs, or whatever it may be. But for all the creatives out there, they feel compelled to create art, and art being a very broad category. They want to create art that's devoted to Bitcoin. So it's absolutely amazing the amount of creative talent that I see from the inbound emails of people wanting to auction off their artworks. Now, a lot of it's physical, a lot of it's digital. I think the physical stuff is our bread and butter. That's the soul of Scarce.City, but there is a big future for the digital stuff. And whatever we can do to support these artists so that they can continue to create this art, and in doing so, spread the memes of Bitcoin, spread the good word of Satoshi. That's what we're all about.
Yeah, back in 2013 or 2012, we were living in Paris, and I was doing collages by cutting up magazines and pasting them on sheets of paper. And one of them has a Mount Gox address, which is one of the earliest addresses in existence, really. That was mine that we used. And, maybe I should auction that off.
Especially if there's anything in that.
Yeah, I haven't checked that wallet in a while. I should first before I auction it off.
Maybe even more fun if you don't check the wallet before. I'm sure you'll find a buyer.
Right. I was hold on. I was going to ask something about this, the Renaissance 2.0, because the power of art to communicate, and especially revolutionary moments. The last revolutionary moment kind of like was in the late 60s. Obviously, we had a lot of similar sort of economic and political turmoil in the United States. We had a lot of amazing like cinematic art at that time, and rock and roll and punk rock and that stuff happening. But the communication, the ability to communicate what's coming and what's happening and help all Bitcoiners, whether it's like a banker Bitcoiner or a pleb Bitcoiner, is like the things like money printer go butter, the all of the laser eyes, the Liata, Bitcoin Liata, like these are powerful communication tools. So it's just a wonderful, fascinating time, I feel. But in terms of your platform, you mentioned layer 3 and what that's going to bring to you. So tell us about layer 3 and what you're looking at in terms of just your platform, but also in terms of Bitcoin, the space and culture.
Well, it's a difficult thing to talk about before it exists because it's all hypothetical and theoretical at this point. But look, there are technologies that are being built native to specifically the Lightning Network for digital assets such as NFTs. I really hope we can find a better word for NFTs because I cringe every time I have to say it. But in any case, yeah, I think what's critical about these technologies scaling is that they're not tied to what's happening on chain. They do not congest the network. They benefit from the security of Bitcoin without potentially hurting the security of Bitcoin network. So I think that's what we're going to see more of is protocols that work with Lightning in a native way to offer digital assets that are tied to some type of media and create new avenues for artists to continue creating art and making a living from making their art, earning sats from making their art while spreading adoption of Bitcoin through their memes.
Right. And, this platform of Orange Pill Podcast, we have a huge community of 20,000 in our Telegram group. And, many of them have been getting jobs at at the companies because in Bitcoin, nobody's lying flat, right? Everybody is up there pumping it up, doing something, building something. So are you hiring? Are you looking for more artists? Like where could people reach out to Scarcity?
We're interested to hear from anybody who wants to contribute. We are very close to hiring. We're considering a fundraise. We're always looking for creative talent that wants to auction off their artwork, and we're always looking for collectors who want to support these artists in their endeavors. So anyone who's interested, please reach out. I'm easy to find. Twitter DMs are open. It's probably the first place to start.
Right. Maybe we could do some of our, Max and I are on a no fucks given tour around the world. We should auction off some events around those on your platform.
Yeah, that'd be cool. I was going to ask, do you see any trends regionally? Like usually the art world is a movable feast. It goes from Paris to New York to Asia. Do you see that on the site? Are you seeing hotspots for Bitcoin art?
That's a really interesting question. I really don't see those trends because I feel like we're all just citizens of the internet at this point. There are no borders when it comes to Bitcoin, and you definitely feel that in the creative space. We receive amazing art from all over the world, and our collectors are all over the world. Geography just doesn't matter for Bitcoin.
How would you describe the aesthetic of Bitcoin art
and culture?
That's wow. That's an impossible question to really answer. Look, I mean, there's always the artwork with the classic Bitcoin B on there, but anything that represents freedom, I feel like, can be considered Bitcoin art. Alex Schaefer's Burning Banks, that's expressing the rage that we all feel towards these institutions, which have just been propped up by our establishment. And what he's done that's so amazing is he's made it like okay for us to talk about it, because he's created these beautiful paintings around it. And it's like, oh yeah, we all hate the banks. That's something to celebrate because they've screwed us over. So just that represents Bitcoin culture in a beautiful way. But anything that represents freedom, to me, represents Bitcoin.
Well, there are in the traditional art world gatekeepers, media outlets, media art magazines, etc., that are critics, and they have established critics, and they weigh in on the aesthetic merit of different things. And this is a huge influence. Clearly, like Saatchi and Saatchi, an advertising executive, created an artist in the UK pretty much out of ersatz, nothing. But do we yet see the emergence of a critical space? Is the New York Times writing columns about digital art, Bitcoin art yet?
They're certainly writing columns about the NFT space. Now, I don't consider ourselves in that space at all, really, because that's the mainstream culture. We are counterculture. Bitcoin is counterculture. Even the rare Pepes are counterculture. It's punk rock in the modern form. Now, curation is always a challenge with any marketplace, and it's a challenge that we're constantly facing as well. The way we've solved it for now, and it's an ongoing process, is the artists that have been with us from the very beginning when we had essentially nothing. They've started to vote in new artists who they feel like represent Bitcoin collectively. Not one person can say who is a good Bitcoin artist, but collectively, and especially as we get bigger, they vote in new artists who they feel like represent the values of Bitcoin as they see it. And from there, our artists have complete creative control. We don't tell them that this is good enough or not good enough. Art is subjective. Art is always bordering the line of brilliance and delusion. And we don't want to step in and say which side of the line a certain artwork is. So that's the way we've solved it for now, but it's a constant challenge. But we're going to do it without the mainstream media gatekeepers. That's for sure.
Is there a Scarcity channel that I can watch curated selections from your site flash by on my screen?
Well, the best place to go is Scarce.City. You'll always see our upcoming sales there. We're everywhere, though. If you're on Twitter, at scarce.dot.city or Telegram, just Scarcity. You'll be caught up to date on whatever our next sales are, curated or otherwise. And we'll make sure that you don't miss a beat there.
Oh, good.
Right. And, Michael Saylor, who has, is a Bitcoin whale and just only entered the space in the past year. He's kind of a newbie, nevertheless, one of the largest holders in the world. And he just tweeted right before we came on this interview, actually, something along the lines of like Bitcoin lit fire to the financial universe. So it just made me think of the Alex Schaefer art, which, we interviewed him back in, I think it was 2010, 2011, when he first came on Kaiser Report to talk about his burning banks, which, he got visited by Homeland Security after burning down, I think it was JP Morgan Chase outside the bank. And it's just interesting that, Satoshi did, do the same thing in the same way. It was an act of art. It was the counterculture to, embed in the Genesis block Chancellor on brink of second bailout for banks. At the same time, Alex Schaefer was burning down those banks as the metaphor of what was going on. Like we're all on as Max say, murmurations. It's all like we're all on the same wave. We're seeing the same things and building a culture around it and our response.
Yeah, well, the fire is out of control. That's the thing. There's no way to stop it. So you have to just develop a taste for burnt flesh.
It reminds me in the Alex Schaefer piece that we just auctioned off. It's Citibank in flames, but in front of the bank, as it's on fire, there's a woman walking with her baby, and she says, "Cool and collected as can be." And it's up to interpretation, but my interpretation is that she owns Bitcoin. She has a way out of this bank on flames situation. So that's the best we can do, is build this alternative system that saves us from the fire.
Yeah. And I mean, you mentioned that there are no borders in Bitcoin, and that's true. Like when you're traveling around, and this is one thing the pandemic kind of stopped for a while, but when you're traveling around and you're going to all these conferences, it's just amazing that we are Bitcoiners and that people from geographically all over the world. But, you have so much more in common with them. And then you get locked down at home and you see your local, regional, domestic, provincial news. And it's just like weird high school sort of like tattle fights and gossip. And you're just like, who cares about this stuff? Like it's a weird that there's this other world out there on fire, just culturally, financially, ideologically.
It's like when I was a kid, I used to, when I turned on the soap operas on TV, I was always struck by how artificial it was, right? Because the lighting is artificial and the set's very artificial, but people were watching it as if it's real. And I was like, don't you see that's fake? But it doesn't matter, right? So it's like everything has become a soap opera in this sense now. Everything is completely fake. Everything we consume is completely fake. Food, media, politics, media, right? The only thing is, and it's fake because of Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is the only thing that's real.
And of course, the art is real, and Pepe is real.
Pepe is real.
More real than any commentator you will find on cable news.
And I have a question. I was at an event like 7 years ago, and this really swell and nice guy came over and said, "This is a really rare Pepe. It's worth $8,000." And he handed me what it looked like a green plastic keychain. What is that?
That was probably an open dime that's actually holding the rare Pepe, the digital token. Because rare Pepes are stored on Bitcoin. You can hold it in any Bitcoin wallet. So an open dime is a great hardware device for actually custodying your rare Pepes.
I'm going to check that out. All right.
Max might just auction it off.
I keep finding stuff in my pockets, like paper wallets and stuff from 10 years ago. And like, what's this? Oh, it's Bitcoin. Oh, I thought it's just raining money all day long. All right. So we'll check back soon. Things are growing, obviously, leaps and bounds. You really touched a nerve in the Bitcoin space. It's like the G-spot of Bitcoin.
There's a lot of passion in this space, and we're just trying to promote it.
That's what I say.
Well, that's it for this episode of Orange Pill Podcast with Max Keiser, Stacy Herbert. We're going to go look through all of our old stuff and see if there's anything we can't auction off. Yeah, I'm going to look through that stuff. I just don't know where to do with all this stuff. They're early Bitcoin artifacts. If rare Pepes are worth something, then certainly Max Keiser's early experience. Well, my collage, I did that artwork, that was a cri de coeur, from my soul expressing, it was like about the rabbit hole. It had like a little bunny rabbit. And then my address was like a circle going into oblivion. And I did this like 9 years ago when I was just getting into the rabbit hole, losing my mind. It's time stamped with that wallet. So we know exactly when it was done. That's what Bitcoin does to you. And I'll tell you what, Max, if you auction that off, the Scarcity bidders would go all over for it. It's scarce, all right. It's super scarce. I got to go and check it out. It's with a whole bunch of stuff. I got so much stuff. I don't know what to do with it all. Well, bye, everybody. And make sure to join Scarcity's Telegram group, too. And we'll see you for the microdose. Our microdoses are always longer than our full dose. That's right. That's why we planned it, because we went through the looking glass. We're living on the other side now, looking at the other end of the telescope. Everything that was big is small. Everything that was small is big. It's all great.